Okay, well, welcome everyone. My name is Wes Leake from the Christian Business Network, and we want to welcome you to this special Federal Budget 2023. It's funny, I kept typing 2003 when I was putting materials together. Where did those 20 years go? Very quickly. So we've got a number of people logging on, so it's great to have you guys on as well. But let's start by doing some introductions as to who we've got here. So, Dr. Rodson Hill, let's start with you. Do you want to take a moment?
Yes, I'm Rodson Hill. I wear three hats normally. I'm a pastor ordained through Australian Christian churches. I'm a part-time business academic. And what else do? I sit on a number of boards, so I'm a company director as well. I'm a bit of a busybody, really.
That's good. Quite a
good thing to be.
Quite a follower of the economy as well, which is
my word. I am
a sucker for punishment.
A sucker for
punishment.
And not afraid to speak up about it, which is good. Okay, so we've got two Alex and Alec on today. So let's actually go to Buenos Aires. So start with you, Alex Cook. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yep, background. Yep, so like Rod, I wear a few hats, two main ones. One is I have a small financial planning business called Livingston Wealth Management. So we help Australian families steward their capital. So it's a traditional sort of financial planning, investing, retirement planning, insurance, that kind of thing. And the second thing, and my real passion, is our ministry, Wealth with Purpose. And so some people may be aware of that through our radio programs on some of the Christian radio around Australia, but also, have a lot of webinars and so forth. But that's really our passion of teaching what the Bible says about money. And we get to have the privilege of doing that in a few different forums. So that's a bit about me. And thanks, Wes, for having me on.
No, it's great to have you here. And Alec, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, I'm Alec Robertson, Chartered Accountant, Director of Marsh Ticknell, Chartered Accountants. So we're a chartered accounting firm based in Brisbane, looking after small to medium business clients and mum and dad businesses as well. So helping them grow their wealth and helping them grow their businesses as well. Married to Heidi with 5 kids. So got plenty of family time and well entertained there as well.
So some of those budget cuts maybe come in handy for you, Alex, particularly in the area of Medicare and those kind of things. You never know.
Yes, that's right. Well, hopefully they don't need to go to the doctor, but if they do, they should be bulk billed. So.
That's good. Well, let's start general comments about the budget, stuff that struck you as you listened to it and have been reading through the budget papers and things since the other night. So, Rod, let's start with you.
Well, yeah, I'm happy to kick off. I've had the advantage of not being in Australia for the budget this time. I'm actually in Seattle at the moment, which explains why I'm wearing something a little warmer than I normally would. But I have had the advantage of not listening to a whole lot of commentary, so I've actually been reading the budget papers. Overall, I'm not too impressed. People who know me know that I worry about the size of government. And this government is spending bigger and bigger. So the size of government is going to continue to grow. And as the size of government grows, that crowds out private sector activity. So more government, there's less action for the private sector. So overall, I don't really think it sets Australia up well for the future and does nothing to improve productivity. And actually, the degree to which we can satisfy the many needs and wants that we have is dependent upon the productivity of our labour.
Yeah. Fair comment. So, Alex Cook, from your perspective?
Yeah, look, I mean, I certainly concur with Rod's comments. I guess some other aspects that they sort of pitched it as a cost of living budget, but the reality is I felt that many of those things were band-aids. So we can talk about some of what they were in due course, but I felt they were very much short-term. That once again, they don't deal with the long-term issues that Australia has, and so there doesn't seem to be a willingness, and to be honest, I'm not sure the opposition would be a whole lot better in trying to deal and make major reform to get Australia on track for long-term prosperity everything seems to be very short-term minded, and the cost of living things were really just handouts. So I thought they were disappointing. And of course, they talked about the first surplus in 15 years, but to be honest, that's somewhat of a moot point, given that it was really just driven by higher tax revenues of commodity prices, corporate revenue, and so forth. It was more their good fortune than anything else. But of course, we go straight back into deficit next year and the year after and the year after that. And so we continue to live beyond our means, which, I think erodes our prosperity and links into with what Rod was saying about government getting bigger and bigger. So, yeah, I think disappointing, but I don't think it was overly surprising. And once again, I'm not sure the opposition would have been wildly different anyway. I'd like to think they would be.
Some of the commentary I've heard is like anyone could have got a budget surplus given the conditions in the last 12 months. And if they hadn't done that, something would have been very wrong.
Absolutely.
Robertson, overall comments?
Yeah, from my perspective, it was a boring budget. So that's good for business. It was boring, especially with it being a Labor government. So there's always a risk that Labor will do something to try and tax business, to try and distribute money elsewhere. So it was good they didn't do that. It's also good that they are keeping the tax cuts for the FY25 year. It'll be interesting to see what happens in 12 months' time. Will they still do that? I think they're very motivated to try and do it, so which will be good for business and it'll be good for taxpayers to sort of resolve the bracket creep that's been happening as well. So instant asset write-off comes to an end. That was expected anyway. So in terms of that, there's still some instant asset write-off that's going to sit in there, but it's only up to $20,000 and only for businesses with turnover less than $10 million. So, but no, I think for a Labor government, it was good to actually see them bank the savings rather than try and allocate them elsewhere. Because I'm sure Jim Chalmers would have had lots of people wanting to spend the money.
I dare say that would have been right as well. I'll just chime in and say thank you to all those that are online. If you've got any questions at any stage, just put them in the Q&A chat, and we can get to them as we go through. Well, let's start by looking at the personal finances and impact to them. There's some tax cuts. Like we've had the rebate the last previous years, but that's going, isn't it, this year? So
yes, it is. So the low to middle income tax rebate that disappears. So that was planned. It was only put in there, during COVID. So that comes out. So we've still got the low income tax offset. So that's still in there, but that's for people with incomes less than 37,500. So yeah, so that's a change that happens from 1 July this year. And then the tax cuts that are proposed aren't until 1 July next year.
So in this financial year, as in ending 2023, we're still getting that rebate this year, but it won't be from next year. Is that right? Sorry to ask you.
Yes, no, it was ceased in June 22.
Okay, so we're not getting it this year.
We're not actually getting it, no.
So yeah, so one of the things that I wondered about is, hang on, they're giving us all this extra stuff, but they're also taking away from us this year. So are we actually going to be better off? I don't know what are others thinking in all this money that's being handed out?
Well, there's some good analysis done on that. So definitely the lower income earners, if you look at it, then potentially they are worse off because they're losing this rebate, and the tax cuts that come in, they may not necessarily get that benefit back.
I think one of the issues for the lower income earners is dealing with inflation. There's nothing at all in the budget that suggests that inflation really will mitigate over the next couple of years. I know they've got reasonably low estimates of inflation, but I think that's the big risk in this budget, because there's still a big spending government, even though, as Alex Robertson has said, they have banked a fair bit of the windfall gain, but it is just a windfall gain and you should bank the windfall gains. The other thing too is that I think businesses, particularly small businesses, will have to watch the increases in their wage costs, because the government has indicated that we'll support again the Fair Work Commission an increase for low-income earners, which is roughly commensurate with inflation. So that implies a fairly high increase at the lower end of the wage scale as well. So there's a few things in there that are going to impact, I think, on the lower income households that could increase unemployment amongst those lower income households.
And another thing for business is unemployment at 3.5% has never been so low. So
No,
so
that's
it's
right.
hard it's challenging for people to find workers to actually do
Yeah,
work.
it is. And that's one reason why there'll be a very high net migration next year, 400,000, and then it will gradually diminish again to about 160,000 at the end of the forward estimates. So that's what the government's response is to that problem, bring more people in. I mean, I think it's a fairly lazy response, quite frankly. And one of the reasons why we have to bring so many people in is to make it quite attractive for a lot of people not to go to work.
My concern, though, also with the bringing of people in, though, is because it's such a large number, is the pressure that's putting on rents and on house prices in general. Because, I mean, one of the things they did to improve cost of living was increase rent assistance by 15%. But if you look at the cost of rent over the last 12 months across apartments and housing, it's already up that already. So it's not really solving it. And then, of course, if we keep bringing in such large numbers of people, that pressure is just going to continue. So at the people at the lower end, I'm very worried about a homelessness problem in a year or two. If we just, you got all these construction companies that have gone broke over the last 12 months, so we can't build enough houses quick enough, yet we're bringing in people by the truckload. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And in fact, if you look at the government's growth figures, where the growth is subsiding, I reckon if you actually took out the immigration, the growth would be flat to negative potentially. It's really just propping things up. So yeah.
But you've got international students who are all due back next semester, which is, I don't know, Rod, how many hundreds of thousands of students are going to coming back into the country. I know my students are coming back in all the time. I mean, I live right next door to a huge homelessness issue at the moment here in Musgrave Park in Brisbane, and they're telling me other places around. So that issue of rent prices and things, the budget really doesn't address any of that at all, does it?
Oh, look, there are some attempts there to improve the supply of reasonably priced rental accommodation, but it won't come online within the next 12 months or so. I think there'll be significant lags. It'll take a couple of years for all of that to kick in, but hopefully there'll be up to 150,000 units built purposely like for rental. They'll be in big blocks that are for rental only. But I think that the lags involved in that will run out for a couple of years.
So and the challenge is if you're struggling to find builders at the moment, then the biggest challenge is going to be to get this stuff built. So they have definitely they've increased depreciation on apartment blocks with more than 50 apartments in them. So they're trying to do something there to speed it up. I don't know if that will necessarily help, but that's an initiative they put in the budget.
So we've got a question here. Do you think those things are going to, do you think the budget may cause increased interest rates to continue to rise, or do you think we've hit the limit there, or do you think it's going to go higher?
Well, the budget says there's going to be no increase in interest rates, but the Reserve Bank's not sending that message.
No, look, at best, the budget won't increase inflation. At worst, I think it will increase inflation. It's not a deflationary budget by any means. So I would anticipate a couple more interest rate rises before they level out. And that's going to make it pretty difficult for people who are holding mortgages.
Yeah, well, your mortgage rates are now up over 50% on the average P&I loan over the last 12 months. So the pressure on people's household budgets is quite immense. It's staggering, and I think my concern is inflation stays a little bit higher for longer. And as you say, that keeps the Reserve Bank on their toes and pushing it up a bit further.
See, banks were doing serviceability based on 5%. Now they're doing serviceability calculations based on 9%. So it's a big change.
Well, the average borrowing capacity now is down over 30% year on year. So that you would hope that would constrain house prices after the massive run up after COVID. But yeah, people's borrowing capacity is coming down significantly as the cash flow tightens.
But of course, higher levels of immigration are going to push
prices
in the other direction.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
And I don't think we're really seeing house prices go down, are we?
Well,
They did. I think they've flattened it out since Feb. Yeah, they're flattened out really now.
Yeah,
but I think the last 2 months they went up. It might have been that and the 7% inflation figure. I think that's why the Reserve Bank said, "Hey, we'll increase by another 25 points."
Yeah, I'd say that was probably their main driver. Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments about the increases to Social Security or Medicare changes, rent assistance? It sounds like they're just playing catch up really to people who are in those there, and which is going to relieve some pressure, but not as far as what they perhaps needed to go.
Well, it's temporary relief, as Alex said in his opening comments. It's really band-aid solutions, not long-term solutions to the ever-increasing cost of living. And of course, they blamed the increase in energy prices on the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which is completely disingenuous because most of the increase is directly a result of their own energy policies.
I see, yeah.
They don't recognise that at all in the budget.
No. We do have a question there. How is unemployment measured? Does anyone want to, Rod, is that a question for you?
It's measured on the basis of an international standard. So what they do is they do a survey, and anybody who has worked for 1 hour or more in the reference week is counted as being employed. And that can include people who are working for no pay within a family business as well. So it's a fairly restrictive definition. The Morgan Polling organisation, they have another data series, which usually shows that their unemployment rate is usually about double the official unemployment rate.
But even so, we're pretty close to full employment, aren't we?
Yes, it's difficult to tell, but we would be currently pretty close to full employment. So there are roughly the same number of vacancies being advertised as there are people who are officially unemployed at the moment. So that indicates a pretty tight labour market.
Question coming in.
People are able to go out of university and walk into jobs, which wasn't the case previously, but that's probably the big change.
I've just noticed that maybe some of the upper level positions people in those positions aren't getting the jobs as quickly as those like your tradies or lower level positions. Yeah. Any changes to negative gearing? I didn't see any in the budget, but did I miss
any? No, I didn't see any.
No, not aware of anything.
Yeah. Okay,
that'd be a hot potato. That one would be a hot potato. That'd be all over the front paper, that one.
Yeah, I know. That's right. And, Labor didn't get in because of that 3 years ago. I doubt if they're going to be touching that as well and doing that. Increase to tobacco prices, tobacco and is a vaping. So hopefully some of their strategies can actually address the vaping issue that we're seeing in Australia. But again, for those on lower incomes, a high proportion of those, I think, are smokers. So it's going to have an impact on their budget as well.
Oh, it will do. I'm philosophically opposed to ever increasing the taxation on tobacco products. I don't smoke, and I'm glad I don't. But I worry about the impact on families if someone in the family is a smoker. So if both parents are smokers, I think it can reduce the amount of income that families have left to spend on other things that are perhaps important to the family. So I'm not in favour of very high taxes on tobacco products for that reason. But I'm fairly keen to see some controls on vaping. I notice a lot of retail establishments have opened in my neighbourhood just in the last few months. Well, it sounds as if they're all going to be closed down. They won't be able to sell vaping products at retail level.
So living here in West End in Brisbane, there's a few shops that just have a constant stream of, and the cash that gets handed over is just amazing if you stand in those shops. Okay, so any other further comments about personal impacts on personal finances? I think we've probably covered those. Okay, let's move on to business. Any tax consequences coming through for businesses? There's no changes to the tax rates at all. I think it's remain the same. Is that right?
No, look, I think probably the main one is the change in the superannuation payment arrangements. Currently, businesses have to hand that money over on a quarterly basis. The government will move to it'll be
Per
pay as you
pay.
go. It'll be per pay. That'll have some impact on businesses because they won't be able to take advantage of having that cash in their bank as long as they might have in the past. And obviously they'll have to make some changes to their systems. I think the biggest issue for business, particularly small businesses, will be wage inflation and inflation in the cost of their inputs. And I just think that's inevitable.
The energy cost, I think, will be a real problem for them.
That's another yes, indeed.
So in terms of
Although I
the
think
in
there's a
terms of the super, in terms of the super moving to payday, we wait 3 years for that. So that's legislated to come in July 2026. But they will put some additional compliance on businesses. Definitely encourage people to, everyone should be on the single touch payroll, but it'll be more using those super clearing houses to try and make it nice and simple to administer that.
So there's two sides to that, isn't it? That people are going to get that money in their superannuation funds earlier, so hopefully their funds will grow much more, even if it's a small amount over that period of time. But over a long period of time, you've got the impact of the interest and all that on there. But Alikar, I think that could actually have a huge cash flow impact on some businesses, couldn't it?
It will do because super's also going up as well. Like super from 1 July goes to 11%, and each year it's going to go up by that 0.5. So that means rather than paying that on a quarterly basis, people are going to have to pay that each week or each fortnight or each month with their payroll. So it's definitely going to be a change. I suppose the question is will the ATO then try and get the PAYG as well? My view on
that was going to be my next question. Are they going to be wanting us to pay our PAYG every pay too? They're kind of set up to go that way.
Yeah, I listened to someone from the ATO recently, and their view is that they can't bring all the business debt in too quickly because it's sent too many businesses broke. So I think the ATO are aware that they're a little bit of a bank for businesses. So if they were to do a measure like that, they would know that would have a significant impact on business. But in terms of the super, the super's for employees. So I'd say that's why the government's moved on that one and gone, hey, let's get the super paid on time, or as the employee's being paid.
Well, the other thing I've seen with small business is they defer paying the super because things are a little bit tight, and then things get worse, and then eventually the worker misses out on months and months, if not a year, of super. So if a business is going to get into trouble anyway, I think there's a legitimate argument to say the businesses should be paying as they go, and it'd just be more of an early warning signal that they've got cash flow issues. Because as I say, I've seen the other side where the employees just miss out on years worth of super because businesses defer it and then get into more trouble. So when perhaps they should have laid off the workers earlier, and there's all sorts of arguments around it. But I think people should be legitimately paid what they're owed.
Well, the trouble is, if businesses don't pay super on time and it gets too late, then they've got to go through a paperwork process with the ATO, so it becomes very onerous. So that's where suddenly it can become a problem. Yeah.
And they're fined 20%, aren't they?
Oh, it's actually hard. It's actually more challenging than that now. There's now director penalty notices out there. So
Yes.
directors can be issued penalties in terms of super not being paid on time or PAYG not being lodged and paid on time.
So, okay, there's a bigger issue there in terms of the ATO does fund the cash flow of a lot of businesses. I think, did I see something about 50% of businesses were behind in paying their PAYG and BAS statements and GST because they're using that as a cash thing?
Yeah, and especially with COVID as well. So that's definitely happened. The ATO's the budget even announced an amnesty period to allow people to catch up on lodgements. So to at least make sure the lodgements get lodged without being charged late fees. So I think the ATO is realising that some people are either ignoring it or choosing not to do something about keeping up to date with their compliance. So they're going to have a big push from June to December to try and encourage people to get up to speed. They did that a few years ago with superannuation, so they're doing the same thing with BAS and IAS.
So, Alex, just confirming the amnesty period is up till the end of December, is that right?
Yeah, from the 1st of June up until the end of December.
Okay. So just a practical thing here. One of the issues is that people don't lodge their BASs because the money comes and falls due, but you really should be lodging your BAS and then talking to the ATO about a repayment plan. Is that the best strategy that people should be doing?
Correct. So, and part of the reason is direct penalty notices. So if you've got a company involved in your structure at all, then you're making yourself personally liable if you're not actually keeping up to date with your lodgements. So it's definitely the key message now is, hey, even if you don't have the cash to make the payment, make sure you lodge.
So this is a key that, like, when I just did a governance course, there was a highlight. It was saying that now directors are becoming personal liable for outstanding tax and super debt, whereas before they weren't. So that's a huge change. Yeah,
correct. That's right. So if they haven't made the lodgements within a certain period of time, then they can be held personally liable.
And I think too, Alex, that every director gets the full bill. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, it's not. It's like anything with a guarantee.
Yeah.
They will look at the path of least resistance. So
that's right.
And the key thing too is that applies to not-for-profit organizations as well as for-profit organizations. So for those of you who are sitting on not-for-profit boards, one of the questions you need to be asking every board meeting is, was the BAS lodged and was the BAS paid? And was the super lodged and was the super paid? You need to be asking those questions.
Correct.
Yeah.
And as directors, we're expected to know that, know that that's actually happening.
Yeah, it's very key. You could, again, something you could get bitten in the bum about if you're not asking those questions of it. Okay, so there seems to be some incentives for energy efficiency for businesses. There's going to be some businesses are going to get $650 back for energy. Bringing in hybrid cars stuff as well, reducing the FBT on those. Anyone want to comment about those kind of things?
So if you're looking at the hybrids, any new hybrid brought from 1st of July 22 is exempt from FBT. It is subject to the value of the car, so as long as you're not paying luxury car tax on the vehicle. So that one's been in for a little while, but that one is continuing. So in terms of that, so definitely if you're looking at a hybrid or electric vehicle, make sure you have your chat to your accountant, because there is potential that you won't have to pay any FBT.
What's the threshold for that, Alex? With
Go on, Alex.
I wouldn't want to give you. I don't have the exact number on me, but it's a number in the 80s. So it's
yeah. I was just wondering if Tesla's sales were going to go up. That's all.
This has been around for a while, but maybe people aren't necessarily aware of it.
I think
it has been happening.
Yeah, I think it cuts out at the same level as the luxury car tax cuts in. So that is around about 80,000.
So what people have been doing is heading up into 30 June is buying the electric vehicle that they use for private use and getting the instant asset write-off as well as getting the exemption from FBT.
And some of the state governments are giving them money too now, aren't they? Like, isn't
Yes.
Queensland
Yeah.
6,000 or something as well?
That's why we're seeing lots of Teslas out there.
Yes. And lots of complaints and no. Sorry, I've noticed some others, but there's some practical things with that in terms of charging stations and all that kind of stuff as well. Okay, something funny is going on my computer. Yeah, anything else in relation to businesses?
I think the big one for businesses is an asset write-off. So that's going to end on 30 June. So up until 30 June, whatever sort of plant and equipment you've been buying, you've been able to claim tax in full on. So anything that isn't implemented and available for use by the end of June will then fall outside of that regime. So going forward from 1 July, the limit will be 20,000 if you want a full deduction, but your turnover in your business has got to be less than $10 million. So that's the big change that was legislated, but that's what's been announced is how things are going to happen from 1 July.
So Ali, just confirm, is that 20,000 like just once or 20,000 for a number of assets?
Per asset.
Per asset.
But what it'll mean, it'll stop a lot of the motor vehicles being purchased for the instant asset write-offs.
Yes. So we could see a slowdown in that.
Yeah, and I think one of the risks for people, some people have ordered vehicles assuming they're going to get an instant asset write-off, but if the dealer doesn't get it to them and before 30 June, then they'll miss out.
Okay, so if you're going to order a vehicle, go out today and do that to make sure it's going to be delivered in time. Is that what you're telling us?
But it depends on the make of vehicle. Some makes I wouldn't bother ordering because you won't get them in time.
You won't get them in time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, question here, NDIS funding, is that going to be changed and how could that affect providers?
Short answer is no, but the government has mooted that they will be looking at some changes to the NDIS. We just don't know what those changes will be. So no one really needs to worry about funding for the NDIS at this point in time. The government has certainly indicated that it will stand by the NDIS. It may look at some ways of streamlining processes and making it a little bit more efficient into the future, but they haven't actually said anything in the budget about exactly how that will happen.
I'd like to see them tighten up the eligibility because it's just an expense that's blown out. Like it's just amazing how much it's blown out by.
And
that's
is
right,
there
way too much.
Compliance and fraud issues they're picking up and spending some money on sorting those out?
Right. There was
Well,
some
I heard a
pre-budget
stat the other
commentary.
day. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, there was some pre-budget commentary around that they were going to look to tighten the eligibility. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out as to how they go about doing that.
Yeah. I just quickly going back to cars, there's a question, does the instant asset write-off apply to leasing of vehicles? But it doesn't, does it? Because
Depends on whether it's a finance lease or an operating lease. So that would be a question for your accountant.
so it's a financing lease, yes, an operating lease, no, but you still need some advice.
Yes, absolutely. It will just depend on how you've structured it.
Yeah. Okay. I think going back to the NDIS, is the NDIS becoming our number one budget item?
No, pensions remains the number one budget item, but
yes.
NDIS is not all that far behind.
And then I saw was the third one interest payments?
Well,
that's the real worry long term.
Look, by the end of, for all that the government has said about reining in spending, they're going to run budget deficits of about $114 billion over this current year. Sorry, not the current year, 23-24, on through the forward estimates. And by the end of that period, the net debt will be around 24% of GDP. So, we're spending a lot of money.
It has to be paid back at some stage, doesn't it?
Well, it has to be, either that or you get inflation. You pay it back, you get inflation, or you reduce government spending in the future. There are three ways of it happening. we're experiencing a fair bit of inflation now because it hasn't been paid back.
And
Like
my
Robert-
concern with all this is the generational impact. You know, the older, you know, those of us who are over our 40s have benefited from all these things, and now the younger generations are going to have to come in and pay for it all. It's not a very fair system. Not to mention the high house prices they have to pay to get into the market and so forth. So it's not good for our future prosperity.
They're not going to appreciate our generation. I've got a graph in front of me, and the debt's growing, so it's up over that $1 trillion there. So it's So at some stage, there's got to be some structural reform done with both parties getting together and actually getting agreement on how we want to sort things out.
We'll get to some structure stuff in a minute. Just going back to housing, I noticed that there was a change in the first home owners grant that those who haven't owned a home for 10 years can now claim. So do you think, like I see that particularly for women who have been divorced, you know, who are now homeless, because women over 50 are our highest percentage of people in the homelessness issue area. So whether that's going to have impact there, but it could rate for some people who, you know, financial things have happened during their life and they can potentially get back into the housing market. But I guess it's only 15,000 too. So it's not but 15,000 is 15,000, you know, in saying that. Does anyone want to comment about the first homeowners grant? And no.
Yeah, there's something called a
say.
home. There's something called a home guarantee scheme. So they have they definitely announced some changes to it. And you are correct around what you're saying there, Wes. So the people that haven't owned a home for the past 10 years are now included in that scheme, whereby previously they were excluded.
Yeah. So that could be something to help people out there. Yeah.
Correct. There's only a certain amount of spaces, so I don't know how quickly those spaces will get taken up, but they're definitely expanding it. But in terms of the total housing market, it's a very small percentage.
And again, it's got to be a new home or, you know, so the question is, can they actually find land? And, you know, there's other structural issues that are in the economy that need to be sorted out there. Okay, next topic, anything in the ATO compliance area? I know we've spoken a bit about it in terms of changing super payments, that there's an amnesty on getting your BAS statements in. Any other thing from the compliance area that we need to be aware of?
There will be some increased GST compliance, which is going to rake in a few $100 million, but I don't know, again, I don't really know the details because the budget doesn't really spell out in detail how that's going to happen, but I understand that's just a continuation of programs that are already in place.
Alec Robertson, do you know much about that?
Yeah, no, they made that as a general announcement. That's normally made every year, that they say, hey, we're doing this and we're doing that. But they definitely mentioned debts greater than 100,000. So I think expect more activity in that space around that. They've also announced this amnesty as well. So this is probably the government sort of signaling, hey, you know, the COVID era is over. It's about time we got things back into shape. And we're definitely noticing that as well. And the whole director's penalties notice, it's really just part of the ATO saying, hey, we're now going to start to come after you a lot harder than what we used to, than what we did over the past 3 years.
So don't put your head in the sand about it, address it, get on top of it, talk to the ATO, put your plans in place, repayment plans and things like that.
That's the big thing. Get a payment plan in place. Hey, if you're struggling cash flow wise, hey, let's get a payment plan in place. Let's get a budget in place and, you know, come up with a plan to repay it.
Yeah, doing that.
And that's all they're wanting. They're just trying to get people to talk to them.
Yeah. And do that. And like I've found with one or two of my clients that they don't be afraid to talk to the ATO. But and if you don't get your way with one of them, hang up and go with somebody else. Just pray that it's you get the right person on the other end of the phone. Okay, so if anyone else has got any questions, please don't hesitate to put them in. A couple there. Steve saying, one of the commenters I heard on the radio was referring to some sort of new tax on unrealized capital gains. Have they brought in such a tax?
No, they haven't.
They did talk about it a few months ago. I
They
think
did.
more in the context of superannuation. Would have been a disaster to bring in a tax like that. I mean, essentially, to pay for a tax like that, some people would be forced to liquidate the asset that sits behind it. It's a crazy policy. I would hope that that one would be booed out of the stadium very quickly by anyone. But yeah, it hasn't.
The only thing they did on the superannuation front was to make some changes to the tax regime for balances over $3 million. But I don't think that included the unrealised capital gains. That would just be an absolute nightmare. Absolutely.
Yeah. So where they're at is they're going to increase. You got balances greater than 3 million. The tax will increase to 30%, but it's only going to be on the it's going to be on a proportionate basis. So those people will pay some tax at the 15% and then some at the 30%. There was no commentary around the unrealised gains, so I'm assuming that that's been cut from the legislation.
Yeah.
I just from comments.
And that's sorry, and just the other thing on that too. There's a timeline on that. That doesn't happen straight away. I can't remember when that's legislated to come in, but it's not straight away.
So again, seek some advice on that if you fall into that category.
Yeah.
I'm hearing a lot of people starting to complain about land tax and the amount of land tax they're paying. Is that on your guys' radar or?
Well, that's a function of inflation, really.
Yeah,
land values are going up a lot faster than they have in the past, and as that happens, land tax goes up because land tax is levied as a percentage of the assumed value of the land.
So in some ways, it's a bit of it's not unrealized gains, but it's a penalty for holding that land for a longer period of time.
Yeah, look, the idea behind it is that you force people to use land for productive purposes. In other words, you really force people to make an income based on that land holding. That's the economic reason behind it. But in any case, it's really a state issue. So land tax is normally a state levied tax.
Yeah. It's good. Okay, now we're getting another question. Any news about the number of protection visas and support for refugee new arrivals?
No idea on that one.
No, they have mooted some changes to the processes and systems which aim to make the whole immigration matter more efficient, but nothing specifically about those items.
Mm-hmm. Okay, shall we tackle this overall budget strategy? And maybe this is going to be a bit more controversial, different people's opinions. It sounded like they really didn't make the hard decisions with this budget. Anyone want to comment? Make some comments about where you think the government should be going in the future?
Look, the structural issues remain. It remains the fact that something like 68% of the revenue raised by government is taxes on production. In other words, it's taxes on the production of goods and services, and it's taxation on work, which of course reduces the incentive to productivity, both on the part of companies and of individuals. And the other issue is that something like 36% of the total government expenditure is in the social welfare area. It's a huge drain. And part of that, of course, is the NDIS. NDIS and pensions are a continuing issue, as is school funding. Look, we're putting a lot of money into areas like health, education, and we're not seeing improvements in learning outcomes. We're not seeing improvements in health. We're pouring more and more into the closing the gap processes, but we're not seeing the gap between life expectancy and so on amongst Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders match that of the rest of us. We're still pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into new programs that don't seem to have any impact. So, look, governments have really got to get serious about making sure they only fund things that work, because we are wasting billions of dollars, absolutely billions of dollars, on programs that don't actually deliver. And you never see a budget saying we've reviewed this, that, and the other thing, and we've discovered that we're not spending our money, or your money, we should say your money, as wisely as we should. So we're going to make changes. But listen, it's not a Labor problem. This has been a problem with the political process, I think, since 2010. It's an ongoing process that's become chronic, and it's got little to do with the political party in power.
Mhm. That's good.
Yeah, I can remember listening to John Howard one time, and John Howard said the best work he did was in opposition with Keating, because they were actually able to work together. They
Yes,
got
yeah.
bipartisan support on stuff and actually made some significant changes. So I think what Australia is looking for, an opposition leader, an opposition treasurer who's actually willing to say, hey, let's work together with the government and let's actually come up with some real changes that are going to stand the test of time, and let's work together. And if you look at someone like Howard, yes, he probably helped keep the Labor government in, the Hawke and Keating government in, but then he still got his time, didn't he? He still ended up,
He did.
being a prime minister for a long time as well.
Yes, and look, Wes, I think the other comment I'd make more at the spiritual level is, as our society gets more and more godless, the reality is that the problems get greater, therefore the need for welfare gets greater. We live in a society now that is constantly asking more from government, just wants, endless amounts. And as a result, and to Rod's point at the start, the size of government just keeps growing. And at some point, it's very unsustainable and the nation loses its prosperity. And, I think the general standard of living in Australia is in a slow but long-term decline. Could it be fixed? Absolutely. Will it be fixed? I think, time will tell. But we don't seem to have leaders at the moment that are willing to make those tough decisions to turn it around. So it's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds.
Okay, so question for you guys. If you were treasurer of our nation, what will you be doing? I did put that on the agenda, sorry.
Look, I think we need somebody who's bold and brave enough to look ahead 25 years and really look at what it will be like for a future generation in this country. We need massive structural changes to the way we actually deliver government services and government benefits to people. I think our media have got a lot to answer for, and because they seem to support this notion that the government should fix everything. Governments can't, nor should they even try in many cases. We have to take a long-term view, and our political processes actually militate against that because of our election cycle and the fact that we have mainly career politicians whose focus is on being re-elected, not on looking forward 25 years to the future of the country to build a strong nation with a sustainable fiscal position.
Good.
Yeah, I'd have a look at GST and also have a look at the whole federal state thing and just look at, hey, how are we doing things across the board, and is there a better way?
So, Alec, would you increase the GST?
Potentially, but it would have to be on the back of a lot of other conditions, and the states would have to follow through on them. Get rid of payroll tax. There's some taxes there that you just want to scrap, but hey, there needs to be some they need to be replaced with something initially.
And that's when GST originally came in. Well, back in 2000, they did get rid of some taxes, but it didn't go far enough back then. And because payroll tax is a tax that states get money directly on, they're very reluctant to let go of it. But the economic stuff shows that payroll tax actually holds back economic growth in our nation.
Yeah, and I think that's why you've got to have that holistic view where you've got to have a look at everything. You've got this 3 level of governments, and there'll be a lot of waste in there. And it's just a matter, hey, is there a more efficient way of doing it?
So which one will you cut out? Get rid of the states or get rid of the local, or just get rid of 2 of them?
I think you need local. Most countries are without state.
Yes. There we go. That's the comment. Alex Cook, any comments? What would you a treasurer?
Well, I mean, I'm thinking not just the economic, as I'm thinking social. I mean, I think we need to repair the family unit. As I say, I mean, a lot of these changes that have come in over the last 30 years are reflecting the breakdown in our society. Now, this is not an economic issue, this is more of a social issue, but if you repair the family unit, you'll actually get rid of a lot of these problems and certainly a lot of the welfare needs. So we need to do that as much as the economic stuff. I'd also like us to reduce the dependency on immigration. I've got no big problem with immigration generally. It's generally a healthy thing, but it's too much. Our infrastructure is not keeping up with it. The housing is not keeping up with it. And you're getting these crush-loaded cities. So I think we need to rethink all of that as well to make it more sustainable and maintain the high standard of living that Australians are used to. And that's certainly not where we're heading at this point in time.
So it reminds me of Peter Costello encouraging you to have one for mum, one for dad, and one for the country. So we have used the budget in the past to make some structural reforms in the family area. So maybe it's time to do that again. Here's a great comment from Belinda. I think the 4 of you gents would make good treasurers. and then some. You do that. Thank you, Belinda, for that comment. Okay, well, we're getting time to wrap up. So any further comments from you guys, and then we'll talk about how people can reach out to you guys.
Well, Wes, I did notice one thing that might interest people in southeast Queensland, and that is the allocation of around $1 billion over the forward estimates to help fund infrastructure or capital works, I think it was, for the Olympic Games. So some people in and around Brisbane will be happy about that.
It's certainly going to be a boom city over the next 10 years until the Olympic Games come. But I see our Lord Mayor is still crying that he didn't get the money that he wanted. So, but hey, you wouldn't be a politician if you didn't do that. Hey, Alex Cook, any final comments?
Final comments? No, nothing in particular. Pray for the nation. I think that's the one we want to do.
National Day of Prayer, 27th of May coming up. So I encourage you to be a part of that. Alec Robertson, any final comments?
No, nothing further from me.
Yeah. Okay, so guys, if people wanted to reach out to you, obviously, how do they do that? So, Rod?
Yeah, the best place to catch me would be at ignitelife.church. You can find my contact details there. That's Ignite Life, all one word, .church.
Alex Cook.
Wealthwithpurpose.com is our main website, and there's an inquiry function there, so people can reach out to that, and we'll love to chat to them and see how we can help them.
That's good. Alec Robertson.
Yeah, so
oh, he just froze. It's Marsh Ticknell Accountants. Alec, you back? I think you just froze as you were saying.
Oh, did you lose me, did you?
Yes. I was thinking the crucial part where people can contact you at.
Yes, that's right. So Marsh Ticknell Chartered Accountants. So just Google us, our website will pop up there, and yeah, phone call or email. If you want to email me, it's alexr@mt for Marsh Ticknell accountants.com.au.
Yeah, that's good. And just full disclosure, Alec is my personal accountant as well. So, and he's very good.
Thank you, Wes. Great to have you as a client.
Do that as well. And of course, for Christian Business Network, check out cbn.net.au and register for our upcoming events and things, which we're about to release some new events as well. Well, thank you so much, guys. This has been very helpful. Like, I think it's flowed very well. We've covered a lot of topics, and thank you for your research and knowledge and for sharing that today. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
Pleasure.
And-
Thanks, Wes.
And do I book you
Thanks,
in?
Wes, and thanks everyone for joining.
Do I book you
Yeah.
in for next year and we do this again?
Yes, you can.
Sounds good.
Sounds great.
Excellent. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. And the recording of this will be made available and sent out to those who have registered. But apart from that, have a great day.
Awesome. See you guys.
See everyone.
Thank you.